Welcome, warriors, with skin as melanated as the day is long. You are now tuned in to the Crossroads, where sustainability meets social justice, knowledge is power, and we are breaking down stereotypes, one episode at a time. Welcome to the Crossroads.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Crossroads. I am your host, Rashida Green, and this is the show for and about environmental justice and those who fight the fight. With skin as melanated as the days are long. Knowledge is power. And we are just out here breaking down stereotypes one episode at a time. Now, the man that you see, or that you may not be able to see, but the man that is joining me today really came here with the knowledge of the assignment. He looks like he's a professional, while I look like I'm fresh from the grocery store, but that's fine. But I'm joined by Raymond Nevo, who just so happens to be running for county council in Prince George's County. So we're keeping it local today. Raymond, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This is a really wonderful opportunity. I feel like it is not every day that I get to talk about these issues on a platform that is created by people of color, and especially locally. So I was very excited to dedicate time and space to this. It's really important.
And I appreciate it. And I'm glad you're here. So we have a few things we're going to cover. But before we get there, we're going to give some flowers. And this is the portion in the show where we honor someone in our lives, someone that has inspired us, living or deceased, and has brought us to this point in our lives. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So, I feel like it's kind of cliche at this point because there are so many people who talk about this person, but she really is someone that enters my mind every day in the work that I do. And that is actually Michelle Obama. I have a specific story around why. She, in 2017, in her last address as First Lady, she presented an award to the School Counselor of the Year. And she gave this speech that I was not planning to listen to. I was at home. It happened to be on in the background. At the time, this was January 2017, the world itself was, at least my world, was feeling pretty low given the future that we were looking at as a country. I myself as an individual was being faced with some medical challenges and was at community college and really unsure if I would be able to continue pursuit of my degree, and really, weighing some potential avenues to go down as a person. And I heard this speech, and she said at the end, be focused, be determined, empower yourself with a good education, and then get out there and build a country worthy of your boundless promise. And to this day, that is something that I think about every day. It is something that kept me in school and continues to motivate me to build a country worthy of not just mine, but our boundless promise.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And actually, now that you said that, I think I have two people that I want to give some flowers to. First is Winston Churchill, because he has a quote I love very much. And he says, if you're going through hell, keep going. Which you're probably like, what? I have always kind of lived by that, because there have been so many dark times, so many things that have come up, especially when you find your purpose. And so it seems like I'm going through all these things. You have to keep going. And then the second person, and I think this is going to marry quite nicely, is I want to give some flowers to my grandmother. My grandmother raised 5 children on a 6th grade education. And she managed to, when she passed and left this physical body, she also was able to leave us a house. And, we are going to be talking about housing. So as part of that, I wanted to bring into the conversation my own personal experience, knowing that coming from humble beginnings, as a lot of us do, that to have the foresight to be able to maintain a home that others can have with some equity was difficult. I'm going to give some flowers to my grandmother today. Now, Raymond, let's just get right to it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I appreciate that story. That is, yeah, thank you.
No problem. So let's get to it now. You have a very interesting origin story, which is what brought you to your run now for county council. Can you talk about that?
Sure. When I think about my origin story, something I've been asked a few times now in the past year, and it's a very long story, but if we're going to cater it to housing, there are some key pieces and things that have happened to me, growing up. I was raised by my grandmother. We were very poor. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment. And when I was in second, third grade, she had a cerebral hemorrhage, which nearly killed her, but it did not. But it did severely damage the left side of her brain, which impacts, speech and mobility, writing, comprehension, all of those things, and left a lot of questions about what would happen to me, being that I was so young, being that we didn't have family in the area. And my grandmother was determined to not let me go because the prospects of where I would go didn't look great. But what it meant is that I had to really step up and learn a lot of adulting skills that, a typical elementary school student wouldn't normally be doing, grocery shopping, organizing bills, such things of that nature. In addition, our home, my grandmother was no longer able to work, and she was able to secure a housing choice voucher, also known as a Section 8 voucher.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, that voucher keeps her in her apartment. Our housing itself, as she got older, her health continued to decline, as well as our housing began to deteriorate. We started to have mold problems. At times we had bugs. The insulation was really poor, which led to me being diagnosed with asthma. And by the time I graduated from high school, I was her full-on caregiver. And as much as I tried to imagine or pretend like I was going to be able to graduate and go off to college, like pretty much all of my other friends were doing, deep down I knew that really was not my path. I enrolled in community college. Our home continued to deteriorate, and my grandmother began needing some, real special care. She began using a wheelchair, and began needing help doing, full on getting dressed, bathing, all sorts of things. She wasn't able to cook. And so, trying to manage this deteriorating home and my grandmother at the same time was, pretty difficult. In my early 20s, my aunt came and lived with us. It was my grandmother's daughter, my mother's sister. She and I had a really bad relationship, and she was very verbally abusive. And it got to a point where, we were in this 3 adults in this 2-bedroom apartment. I no longer had a space to stay. And I began, staying with friends, sleeping on couches, but it got to a point where that wasn't really sustainable because,
right.
And I was too ashamed to tell my friends, I don't actually have anywhere to stay. So I started sleeping in my car, and, I would, after hanging out with people, I would drive back to the apartment. I would park kind of far away in the corner of the lot and get in the back seat of my, 2000 Toyota Solara and sleep in the sleeping bag.
There are no such things as the back seat in a Toyota Solara.
Right.
So we're
it is
clear. Okay.
Yes, it is. In a 2-door, it's a 2-door.
Oh.
But yeah, but I figured it out. I figured out like, how I could stretch as much as possible, how to move seats. Like I was doing it so much, I had a routine. And so that itself also became unsustainable because, it was up until then, really the lowest point in my life. I was severely depressed, but also didn't really feel like I could talk about it. I was working full time as a barista, and then as a sales associate for a chain clothing store. And after I finally told some folks about it, never my family, I never told them, but some friends helped me find a place, and I was able to rent a room. That was my room for the first time, ever in a home that I wasn't caring for. And,
Wow.
it was kind of a surreal feeling. And here I am in my mid-20s. And as difficult as all that was, in my life, my own housing story, I had found a partner, we moved in together. You know, my personal housing story has continued to get better. Now being a homeowner here in Prince George's County. However, in 2017, my grandmother began fighting an eviction, a wrongful eviction from the very apartment that I grew up in.
Oh,
And
God.
at that point, she'd been living there for 42 years. She was by far their oldest tenant. It was a 160 unit apartment complex that had gone through many owners, and this owner wanted to sell, but the buyer would not buy with Section 8 tenants. And over time, and I did not know this at the time, this was all things that I discovered, going through this process. But we did notice that there were a number of Section 8 tenants who slowly began leaving for one reason or another, leaving my grandmother as the last one. And they moved to evict her after she escalated a mold complaint that was making her very ill. And they refused to fix the mold and instead moved to terminate her lease, and gave her 90 days to move out. No resources, no anything. So realizing, that they were, retaliating against her for what she had done. I was still in school. I was trying to figure out all the resources I could to help navigate that situation and prevent it, and I was not able to. And a week before my birthday in August, the sheriff came and escorted her out, wheelchair and all. All her belongings were thrown in boxes very frantically and thrown in a storage unit, totally unorganized. And she was homeless for a week short of a year. And that year is really the beginnings of who I am today and how I got here. I don't know how you feel about your grandmother. It sounds like you love her. I love my grandmother deeply. There are times, even today, when she still will frustrate me and make me very angry. But at the end of the day, I would do nearly anything for her. So seeing her in that position, having to go from, different hotels and motels, and then staying in a shelter with other people who, were doing drugs or, smoking or, even making physical threats to her safety. If that doesn't motivate you to really get involved in a cause, I don't know what will.
Look, this is making me single-handedly want to get more involved in housing. And so there's a few things I want to pull out. So in Maryland, Now, it's been a while since I've looked at the laws, but I know that Maryland was a very landlord-friendly state where landlords are in essence allowed to terminate a lease pretty much at will, I believe, right? Like they don't really have to have much reason to terminate a person's lease.
Right. So you can't evict, but you
Okay.
you can terminate a lease.
Mhm.
And that was the first move they moved to terminate. But I should know this, she's in California. So this was happening in California.
Oh God, even worse. Carry on.
Yeah, which, but this was Sacramento, and housing laws are really local. So, San Francisco was far different than Sacramento. Sacramento was very landlord friendly. It's very similar to Maryland. Someplace like DC is less friendly to landlords. But yes, the comparisons to where she was living in here are nearly equal.
Since you mentioned California, it is also just worth noting that there is an insane housing issue, a housing crisis that's been going on in really the state of California. But if you want to get specific, Los Angeles, we know that from the presence and the prevalence of Skid Row, a lot of the terrible things that have happened, not because the people themselves necessarily are violent, but just the violence that is allowed to occur because people are underserved. Just wanted to call that right on out. As part of your run for office, what is it that you feel makes you uniquely qualified to fill this position, to be on the county council? What is it that you bring that you feel is what makes you the baddest of all the candidates that are out there right now, or yet to hit the streets?
Yeah, I love this question because it really plays out into what I believe we should see in our government in general. And that is someone who has equal parts experience and expertise. There are a lot of folks out there who hold a lot of expertise in policy. They worked with so-and-so, they know the data, they know the stats, but they haven't actually experienced the problems that they are trying to solve. And it is evident, not just in Maryland, all over the country, that there are folks trying to solve problems that they have no idea, any clue about. And this is why I think or I should say I know, I am exactly what Maryland needs. I'm exactly what Prince George's County needs. There are so many people experiencing several different hardships that I myself have experienced, not just with housing, but with education. Being a bused student who, for first grade through eighth grade, rode a school bus.
Same.
Across town.
Oh.
And the school bus that took so long that by sixth grade, I was taking public transit, a light rail, and then a short walk, and then a bus for an hour, because that actually took less time than the school bus.
Oh my God.
Healthcare, going without healthcare, especially mental health care, having experienced assault, and having witnessed, assault in my family, sexual abuse, sexual assault, the list really goes on and on. And having someone who has experienced those hardships, I think does two things. It helps inform better policy. And second, I think it lights a fire under that policymaker to keep going, even when they hear a no, even when there's a setback, because they know that those people are depending on them. And so, to look back and say, well, we didn't get exactly what we wanted, but we did get this
but
one
here's
thing.
This thing.
So we're gonna celebrate this, and we'll come back to it at some point. And to me, it's like, no, we got this. Great. Let's keep going.
Yes.
And something that happened recently that I think is a great example of this is, you see Cori Bush, who herself was homeless,
Mm-hmm.
who spent nights on the Capitol steps,
Mm-hmm.
really to bring awareness and to really highlight the importance of ending the eviction moratorium would do. And someone only with that kind of experience
right
would have it in them to do advocacy at that level. And I think that's exactly what we need to see more of.
And what do you think is a major ingredient that's missing when you think about the experience and the expertise, right? Coming from at least the expertise aspect, what are some things that for the average person, the layman, the average citizen, what are some things that you wish people knew about public policy? What are the things that, one of the great things about this particular session that we had, this last particular session, is that it was all virtual. So everyone had unprecedented access in a way that was never seen before. Yes. So to build on that, what are some things that people need to know about public policy that would help them to continue to make informed decisions about who they vote for, or even get engaged at all? Because a lot of folks aren't as engaged as they should be, right?
Right. And, I think, I don't know if it's as engaged as they should be or as they have a right to be. Because what you highlight, which is access, is huge. And the virtual environment has created a lot of access for folks who would not have traditionally had it.
Right.
But it still creates its own barriers in some other ways. Having Spanish translation is really key, and it's not just Spanish. There are several other languages that are prominent here in Maryland. Yes.
Mandarin.
Yes.
So many things, so many different languages. That's like the beauty of this area.
Exactly. And, and whether a person is a voting citizen or not, they should have a say if they are a contributor to a society. And, the folks that live here, especially in this district, there are a lot of non-voters here, but that does not mean that they are not contributors.
Right.
Children are not voters. They are contributors. Mm-hmm. They deserve to have, be advocated for. They deserve to be heard if they in fact can make themselves as individuals be heard. And I think creating those spaces is really important, and I think would really lead to some different focus by our policymakers. And it's, and access is one part of it, but also the transparency. I think access is limited because I also think policymakers, they work very hard to do things in public and do things out of the public eye.
Say it again.
They are so strategic in what they want people to see and what they don't want people to see. And, and that's just not how I operate. There are so many aspects of my life that I make very public on nearly every aspect of my life. If you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. And I think that if you're going to work to try to hide, your policy approach or your policy position, who does that benefit? How is that beneficial to your constituents? I lead a coalition in Maryland of people that work at several different organizations within the state, and we do not always agree on things.
You can if you're in a coalition.
No. But we have to talk about them.
Right.
And, and I'm willing to talk about it. I've been telling people, everyone is not going to agree with my policy position, but everyone is willing to have a conversation with me about it if they would like. And I'm not someone who's going to be, hold a position. And, if I learn something new, some new data, there's something that moves me to change my position, I will change it and acknowledge that. It's not going to be this, trying to make an excuse on, why I was always on the right side, which is a practice. So, access and transparency are very key.
And drilling down a little bit deeper into PG County, because of course we call it PG. That's just how we talk or refer to it. But we also know that there has been what I would classify as an unadulterated, never ending effort to debase and to create this stigma about PG County, that it's just where all the Negroes live and they're just over there shooting and carrying on, to the point that whenever someone says, oh, I live in PG County, someone might clutch their pearls and look. And so from your perspective, that aside, what do you think are the main challenges impacting PG right now?
Housing and development in general is, to me, the biggest issue in Prince George's County. Developers get a ton of incentives, and they get incentives everywhere. You know, this isn't just unique to Prince George's County, but they get some pretty incredible incentives here to develop that really allow them to avoid a lot of taxes, which then get passed off to the residents, especially homeowners. And I believe that one of the reasons that we see so many of these incentives is because of exactly what you just noted. There is still this mindset that people need incentive to work here or live here, that otherwise this is not a desirable place to live.
Yes.
And so I need something extra if you are going to convince me to build my apartment complex there or to start my business there, because people won't want to go there. And that is far from the truth, especially now. You know, Prince George's County is growing.
It's gorgeous.
And it is gorgeous. It is, you know, when we were looking at buying, we had a choice: live in Prince George's or live in Montgomery County. We chose to live here, and are very, very, very happy that we made that decision. This county has a lot of potential. It has a very rich history, and is now actually, you know, a place that people seek. And so what I know is that as a resident, as a homeowner, we pay far too much in property taxes for the amount of services that we get. And, you know, we've knocked on, after yesterday, getting close to about 1,700 doors.
Nice.
And every homeowner that I've spoken to comments on how high the property taxes are. We just got our property tax bill.
Me too. Montgomery County. And I was like, oh, you girls have got me messed up, but carry on.
So I don't know how much yours was, but ours was $10,000. It's a $10,000 annual tax bill. Imagine being someone on a fixed income who has worked really hard to pay off your home.
I'm sorry. Because perhaps I just hallucinated. So you said $10,000 is.
Yes, it's actually sitting on my island right now. I could show you. Yes,
I might faint or vomit. I what? $10,000?
It's a $10,000 tax bill. It's like a few hundred short of 10,000. It's like 9,700 something.
And a cheeseburger and a biscuit. Like, who cares? Oh my God. Okay. Be prepared for me to randomly blurt out $10,000 again at some point in this conversation, but please.
Yes. You know, that's like a mortgage for some people. And for folks that have worked really hard to pay off their mortgage, you know, seniors who are retired, you know, and you're still paying a $10,000 tax bill on your property annually, that's not okay. And it, you know, and it's known that the residents, property tax income, it makes up a huge portion of the revenue of Prince George's County.
It better.
And it's too high of a portion. And that is because our developers who develop these really large apartment buildings, they don't pay taxes the way we do. They get a lot of tax breaks. And if you look at the records, you've seen that every developer that I can find in the last several years is granted something called a pilot, which is called a payment in lieu of taxes. So I will say off the bat, I don't think pilots are terrible, but I don't think fee waivers are terrible. I don't think, bonuses are terrible, but it needs to be means tested. You have to earn a bonus.
Yes.
Everyone isn't just granted one.
Right.
And everyone is just granted a pilot, which allows a developer to pay a lump sum of taxes instead of an annual tax payment. And that lump sum is very, very often significantly less than they would have paid if they were just paying taxes like a normal person. Which means that they are either bringing in a ton of renters or businesses, likely both, because the trend is to build these high rises with
storefronts,
commercial at the bottom and then residences on top. So they are, one, bringing in people who are needing more resources from the county. Two, inflating, increasing the property value around. So, for homeowners who live around these large properties, their home value is increasing, but so does their tax bill. And that's not something that the county likes to talk about.
Oh,
I wonder why.
No idea. Couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
And so I really think that we need to reassess where our revenue is coming from, because it's not okay that we are heavily the most reliant on property taxes from homeowners for the revenue that comes into this space. And I believe that housing really is at the foundation of a person's general well-being and their healthcare, their education, their job, all of it. And so if we can work at fixing housing at the core, not just creating, fixing a symptom,
right,
then I know that we can work towards making Prince George's not only, highlighting its real attractiveness, but actually making it more equitable.
Yeah. And so I think we have more than come to the crossroads. And this is where the point of the show, where we just bring everything all together. And so I'm going to add a little to this to say that one of the beautiful things about PG County is that it is part of the Anacostia watershed. And for the people who don't know what the watershed is, that's just basically where your water goes before it meets the ocean. And it needs to be protected. That is one of the beautiful things about really the state of Maryland, where we live, is that it is very green. There's a great mix of urban, but also rural as well. And we can see that more, I feel, because I live in, in I call it the Northern Wilds in Montgomery County. So I get to see a little bit more of that, but I find I'm always very interested when I'm in PG just to see how beautiful it is. People imagine, or they think when they watch the news, we are in need of protection of the watershed. And we are also in need of protection of the citizens too. Because as we're talking about this, this increase in property taxes, I mean, if you've got an apartment building, assuming probably about 160 units, can people actually afford to live there? Who can afford to live in a high-rise building with a Starbucks and a dry cleaners and a Chipotle downstairs? If not folks who have that kind of disposable income. It's completely eliminating a certain portion of the general population. We got to bring that into the conversation as well. And going back to your run, what are you hearing from citizens, predominantly homeowners, but what other things are you hearing from constituents that you're like, this just motivates me even more to win this race?
So, the discussion of environment and environmental justice is also huge. And it's not the first thing that I hear from, it's interesting, it's not the first thing that I hear from renters often enough. It's one of the first things I hear out of homeowners, which I think is interesting. And, we can all make assumptions on why that is. But being able to address our environmental issues equitably. And so residents who are living in areas that, have factories are just more exposed to, smog and greenhouse gas and, all these negative things that, you may not see every day, but
right.
it's, something over time. And, I can't, you asked a question of what I'm hearing from residents. I'm hearing that that's a problem. I can say something that I'm hearing from the folks that I work with, like I said, I am the housing piece of this coalition and happen to be a lead for it. But it is made up of experts in environmental and energy policy.
Nice.
And so I work with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I work with the Sierra Club. And, those are two big green groups. And this is an issue. This is something that we talk about for the state of Maryland quite often. And what these groups now have began to acknowledge, which I think is great because it's a first step, but it's that in their efforts to work towards, bettering the environment, they have historically really overlooked the impact on people of color and would sooner prioritize, a win for the planet over a win for a community of color. Or rather, a win for the planet despite how it would negatively impact the community of color.
Right.
And these organizations are now realizing, that in order to truly, have real environmental justice, you also need to look at racial equity and, racial disparities. And so, I hear from folks of color all the time, and it's true, we get the short end of every stick. And for women of color, you don't even get the stick sometimes.
No, you just sort of get like, I don't know, like a piece of old chewing gum. It's
Right.
like, here you go, girl. Like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? Yeah.
Right. Or like, oh, you're there? Oh, I didn't even see you.
Oh, hey.
So, sorry. And so, one of the things that I am cautiously optimistic about is how these groups will begin to work within themselves to address racial equity issues. And a lot of these are, long-term, unseen. It's not something someone is facing day to day. A person who lives among a bunch of smog isn't every day walking out and necessarily, even realizing like, I'm inhaling all the smog.
Right.
It's likely like, I got bills to pay. I'm late for work. My car, my
Where
car
is
isn't
it?
working.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yep.
And, so having folks who will look at these long-term sort of unseen issues that are going on in the state, but also in the county, is, I think, going to be a really important turning point for Prince George's going forth and really help to sustain, the beauty, water. We all know now, unfortunately, thanks to Flint, that, water, we can't take water for granted.
No. Turns out.
And so, and so, looking now and evaluating our own watershed, green space issues, is going to be very important for us as a county to look at.
Yeah, I definitely agree. As we're kind of coming to the close of the show, I think you're going to be very instrumental in the council. I have very good feelings about what we've talked about, what you bring to the table, and your personal story. I know for a fact that constituents are going to flock to that. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you're doing. This is the first time you're running for office, isn't it?
It is, yes.
We didn't even talk about that. This is the first time you're running for office. Did you think, oh, maybe I should do something a little smaller? Like, did you have those kinds of fears? Or how are you processing your feelings, period, as you are taking on this new opportunity, this new endeavor?
I think that I don't know if I would say that I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of reservations, and I was very cautious and thought for a long time about doing this. This running for this position was not my idea. It is something that a friend brought to me and said, I have experience with the county council. I know how they operate. Your seat is going to be open. I know who you are and your story. I know the work that you do. And this really just feels like the perfect fit. And I think you should do it. And I said, okay, let's talk about that more. And the processing of the fear and everything happened, I think, in the first few months, where I talked with him and very few people about it and really tried to find every single reason why I could not run. And, trying to basically convince myself that this wasn't possible. And doing the research of the fundraising and the time commitment.
Oh my God.
The precinct data and the voting patterns and could I assemble a team and all these things, and could I actually door knock? And that fear really, I think, kind of ended when I went to Georgia. I went to Georgia on January 1st. I drove down by myself.
Oh.
To canvass for Warnock and Ossoff. I've never canvassed. I've never knocked on doors before.
Really?
I didn't know anyone in Georgia.
Like, hi, I'm a stranger.
Yeah. I found an area that I knew was a battleground area. It was just out, north of Atlanta, northwest of Atlanta. And got a hotel, looked online to see what groups were door knocking, signed up and showed up. And
nice.
For 4 days, door knocked in some areas that felt fine, some areas that I'm like, oh, there's like a Confederate flag hanging off this house that I'm supposed to knock. Okay.
And you're over there looking like Miguel.
Yeah.
Like, who is this person? Because they don't know who Miguel is.
Exactly. So that helped to process and alleviate a lot of the fear. I think a lot of people fear, things about their personal story coming out, and and I think for me that has really been a strain, being able to talk about those things and share that I've been assaulted, share that I've been homeless, share that I've dealt with depression and still fight it and curb it. It's still an issue. And I've been arrested, I've been in jail.
Raymond.
So like all of these things that a person would typically fear discussing are things that I welcome the discussion, because I know that there are so many others just just like me. It's, I'm not trying to be a politician. I'm an advocate. I just want to be an advocate who has the ability to make some decisions.
I like that. I like the way you put that together. So Raymond, where can people donate? Where can they sign up if they are local and they want to door knock or phone bank or any of those things? How can people find you?
So they can go to raymondnevo.com and you will find a space to donate. There will also be a section to sign up for upcoming door knocking, phone banking events. We have some fundraisers as well. Also follow me on social media, which is at Raymond_Nevo for Instagram and Raymond Nevo for Facebook. I think if you Google me, if you don't remember any of those things and you just Google my name, Raymond Nevo, you will find all the things that I want you to see and then all the other things. So, folks can do that. I invite them to. I don't know who my opponents are going to be in the end, but
who cares?
But I feel like
lambs for the slaughter. Okay, sorry. I'm in that kind of mood. I'm sorry.
I will continue to invite people to Google me. I'm the only Raymond Nevo in the country, so I am truly unique.
Yes, I like this. I like all of this, and we don't care who those other people are. God bless you, but we've come to take over. So you guys, God bless you. Anyway, I'm very competitive. And I like success. And I was with my family and we were just drinking and I was in that Viking mood of like, tough family. So that's where my mind is. But Raymond, before this goes too left, thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast today. And I know that you were door knocking yesterday and, you're here to do this again. So it is much, much appreciated. So thank you. And everyone, we will see you again at the Crossroads.
Thank you. This was wonderful.